And finally on the stage with me, we have Mr. Steve Maxime. He was already on a panel yesterday and he's here with us and he's representing Specto. So Steve, introduce yourself and speak a little bit about Specto, what they do to build resilience.
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning, all, both here in the room and online. My name is Steve Maxime. I have a bit of a history in dealing with community organizations and NGOs. I was on the board of Right for more than a decade. Right is one of the major nature centers out of Trinidad. And since I've been living in Grenada, I've been a member of the board of Specto, the St. Patrick's Environment and Ecotourism Organization. I'm also an advisor to NIFO, the Northeast Farmers Organization. And in all of these capacities, what we try to do is to build the capacity of these organizations to access funding for the stakeholders that matter most. Because most of these initiatives that we are planning, that we're involved in, they all boil down to these stakeholders who are literally at the bottom of the chain where the tire meets the road. And we have been able to mobilize significant funds for environmental protection, for resilient development, for strengthening the infrastructure, for defense of livelihoods. Specto organizes the turtle tours, which as a cheap plug, I can say that the tours start today, so that if anyone online or those here in the audience want to take part in the Specto guided turtle tours, that's on as well. And all of these, one of the advantages of working with community-based organizations in terms of climate resilience is the way in which they're able to harness resources from the three major UN Rio conventions. So both from the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. So within Specto, we are able to pull resources from all three of those conventions to do the work of the community, to ensure that we have a more resilient community, whether we strengthen the green or the blue economy. Later on, hopefully we'll be able to get into some more of the specifics in terms of how we build this community resilience.
Okay, great. Audience, this is not an all-meal. Yeah. Steve, Specto is an organization that could benefit from something like that. How do you see?
Definitely. I think what has been most transformative over the years within the Caribbean, and from my perspective, has been this recognition that community-based organizations are non-profits, but they are not supposed to be non-revenue generating. And I think that ability to recognize that they have to do some of the funding themselves. So I mentioned the cheap plug with the turtle tours and so, but within Specto, within NIFO, within a number of the organizations that I work with, they have recognized that they have to get up and do it themselves. And when they access funding directly, without intermediaries, without too many intermediaries, they're in a position to now execute. And the delivery, there's a short distance for the delivery. It is from grassroots to the beneficiaries.
Right.
Very few intermediaries. And a lot of the funding doesn't take a circular route. So the consultants that are used are locally based. The people implementing the projects are locally based, so that any income generated is circulated within the particular communities, whether it be for the tour guides or people working in the bird watching and kayaking industries with Specto. Mm-hmm. Another important impact is that community-based organizations are in a position to advocate for climate justice in ways that the central governments may not be able to do, may not be able to articulate within the confines of common but differentiated responsibility. I think the mere idea that we are at an NDC conference tells us that we are here because we have all committed to this common but differentiated responsibility. So that even though we are not the major emitters, we still have to show how we are doing our bit to contain our emissions. And community-based organizations are well placed to do that and to access the type of funding that comes out of the GCF and GF and UNDP through the small grants project, etc. So I think that that's another advantage to having a community-based organization.
Clement, Steve, how do you anticipate Spectre using that kind of data now to target communities and work with them?
Well, I think it's a continuation of the type of work we've been doing. We have had outreach to Fragments of Hope in Belize, the Mona Climate Studies Group, so that in terms of mapping and modeling, we are fairly well connected. This would just be an adjunct to what we are currently looking at now. But in terms of community-based organizations, one of the things that I wanted to highlight was our appreciation. When I say our, I mean community-based organizations as a group, as a whole, in return on investment. The time frame that we work with usually extends beyond the 5-year election cycle of most governments. And private sector for-profit firms tend to have a tighter deadline for returns on the investment. So I think one of the benefits of community-based organizations is this longer gestation period that they're able to harness, because they're not looking for the quick returns that might be more for the profit-centered, profit-focused organizations. And they're outside of the planning cycles of most Caribbean governments, which is within a 5-year time frame.
Yeah,
So it's a good example for that.
Okay. We're talking really now about sustainability, right? You alluded to it, that you're working with the youths and monitoring and evaluation is a part of it. But Steve, are you challenged with that? And I'm going to ask Alison the same question. How is she envisioning sustainability of our program?
Well, in terms of capacity building awareness of the youth, outside of Spectre, at a national level, the UNDP Small Grants Project commissioned a study of most of the community-based organizations in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And out of that study, we recognized certain weaknesses. And based on those weaknesses, we actually developed, I was asked to write the core curricula for an associate degree program, something called Sustainable Community Development Practice for Civil Society Organizations. And I'm proud to say that we graduated the first cohort of that associate degree program back in 2023, so that we now have a core of people who are prepared, trained to handle the vagaries of trying to run a community-based organization within this context of the climate crisis. That we have done that from that end. At the other end, in terms of the 4-H movement and other youth-based organizations, we have provided a lot of training, internship capacities, travel tours, because as you well know, Trevor, one of the best ways to learn would be to, actually get our interns into Trinidad at Azerite, into Belize at Fragments of Hope, so that when we start talking about mangrove regeneration, send some people down to Guyana, we talk about mangrove regeneration and other types of activities like that that are meant to bolster the activities of the organization. I think we are well placed. I'm really, really proud of what they've been able to do, not just in Grenada, but in the wider Caribbean as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Colette Bino. I'm a professor at the University of Guyana and also the chair of. I have a very simple question. Given the fact that we're talking about resilience, and we know that there are certain parameters or certain concepts that have to be considered. So we are talking about exposure, sensitivity, and capacity. I would really like each panelist to tell me and to tell us whether the consistent use of the term natural disaster is still applicable in this 21st century. Thank you.
Sorry, Prof. I want to strongly suggest that, I mean, we have been trying to eliminate that term from our lexicon. There's nothing natural about a disaster. You can have a disaster triggered by a natural hazard, but there's no such thing as a natural disaster. Point final. I mean, you will not hear that in any conversation emanating from Spectro or any of the organizations that I work with. So we have already laid that myth to rest.
Second that.
Alison, you want to comment on this?
Oh, just agreeing. I think the term is defunct and we need to agree on different ways to talk about these hazards. I agree.
No, I think the way we push this is very scientific. We're very precise in our language. It's one part of the work that we do. We also do insurance with the UNCDF. It's a UN Capital Development Fund. And UNCDF does the parametric insurance. We don't use words like natural disaster. We talk about high tide based insurance, microinsurance. We're very specific in our language. So I agree. Yeah.
And Prof, I'm not too sure if you were on the same seminar with me when I had Professor Michael Taylor agree with me in public that even the IPCC definition of resilience is no longer as valid. But I don't think this is the correct forum for us to get into that. But we are aware of what true resilience means, and we are aware of the correlation between vulnerability, exposure. We know the risk triangle, and we recognize that there are certain aspects that we can manipulate, but the hazard itself, especially climate hazards, are way beyond our control. And it's the basis of this NDC type conference, because we have already agreed that there's common but differentiated responsibility, and we have to do our little part to ensure that the less than 1% that we produce is mitigated, so that we belong to the community and we can use our NDCs as ATM card to the GCF, which is what it is.